The Fed15 podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a financial planning practice serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of either Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services, Inc.
Welcome to the Fed15 podcast presented by Serving Those Who Serve. Each week, we'll discuss the latest news and info that Feds need to know in 15 minutes-ish or less. So whether you're a seasoned federal employee or just starting out in your career, we've got you covered. So grab your coffee, your energy drink, your green juice, whatever gets your motor running in the morning, and we will, or the afternoon or the evening, wherever you are in the world, and we will tell you what you need to know but might have missed. We're your host, Dan Sipe, and I am joined by the incomparable and unduplicable, I made up that word, Katelyn Murray.
Yes. Unduplicable to the, good graces of everybody. For everyone's benefit, unduplicable. Well, we have, so one caveat that I have on our 15 minutes-ish, not like anybody who listens to this show regularly is holding us to any kind of 15-minute time limit. But we do have an extra special episode again this week. You guys are getting spoiled in November. We have an extra special episode. We are going to run a bit long today. Today's episode is probably going to be about a half an hour or so.
Totally worth it.
Yes, because we have a super special guest joining us that we're really excited about. So, Dan, tell the people who we're talking to today.
Okay. Well, first off, because I always have to fall into one of the many voices in my head, I could tell you, me love our next guest. Me so happy. This guest here. We're having Gingersnap Jess and Katelyn. Let's give her a nice intro and tell the good folks who she is and why she's so special to us.
So those of you who are long-term listeners of our podcasts, actually not even the Fed15, but the FedLife podcast, the flagship podcast, that first one we ever had at Serving Those Who Serve, will remember an episode years ago during another certain government furlough where we covered furlough cheesecakes and
Indeed.
The brilliant and innovative ladies behind that project. Today's episode is sort of similar. We have Jess from Snap Jess Cookies joining us. Now, Jess is a former digital media specialist with NIH. She was with NIH for almost 3 years and was separated from service in April due to, all of the recent government downsizing. Now, Jess was in a really interesting position at that particular transition because in the beginning of 2024, she had launched her side gig at that point in time, which was Gingersnap Jess Cookies. And she had kind of been baking for a bit. And then obviously with the riff, she was able to kind of pivot and pour a little bit more of her time into that project. So welcome, Jess. We are so excited to have you with us here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So Jess,
go ahead, Dan.
So Jess, I'm a fan, and I'll get to the why of that a little in a minute. But so I started looking at some of your past articles and your content out there. And one of the things that really touched my heart was you expressed a concern about the mission you supported, being hurt because of you and other people leaving. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've worked in public health in one way or another for 15 years. My entree to public health was as a Peace Corps volunteer in El Salvador in 2010 to 2012. And that's where I really fell in love with it, with the communication aspect of public health and how you draw people in and how important that part of public health and science really is. And so my career has followed that path the whole time. And I worked as a contractor for about 7 years before I came on to as a Fed at the NIH, doing projects for different government agencies, but primarily for CDC. And I just saw the power of health and science communication during my career at that point. And so I think that's primarily why I have just concern about the loss of that mission, that information is no longer being communicated to the public, and that a line of communication between NIH and scientists, grantees, potential young scientists is not happening at this time because of that. So that's my biggest concern, I think.
Well, obviously, the transition that you experienced earlier this year, is a heavy one. Can you share a bit about what that transition was like emotionally and practically, going from federal service to running your own business full time? And I know you had mentioned that this was something that you had been doing for a while, but ramping it up, on such a quick turnaround. What was that like?
Yeah, I was kind of poised coming into what would be a busier season for me with my side hustle. So farmers market season had started in May, and we received our RIF notices in April. So I was kind of gearing up to be a little more intense with my side hustle nights and weekends when it happened. I participate in our local farmers market here in Laurel in our historic Main Street area, and then do just other orders. So I was kind of ready for that. But of course, like a lot of people, I did not anticipate losing this career, losing, this opportunity that I worked so hard for it and thought was a very stable opportunity, right? Like we work very hard to get into, a federal government position. And so I had no intention of leaving, of course, this is where I wanted to build my career. The NIH is a very special place, and I really loved my time there and my team as well. So when I first got my RIF notice, I had, I pivoted immediately and started applying to all kinds of public health, healthcare, communications jobs as my new full-time job, basically, applying to jobs. And I got, 3 interviews into one position. I got 5 interviews into a different position, but nothing was actually coming through. And it was just getting to be extremely discouraging. And the RIF process was also dragging on. There was a lot of uncertainty about if separation was going to happen, officially when that date was going to be. And, frankly, it was just too much chaos for me in my life. And I needed to focus on something positive. And I just talked with my husband, and he was really, really encouraging that I at least, take a month or two and only focus on the cookie business, because that was just a really nice bright spot. And I had a lot of community support behind me for that.
Very cool. So tell us a bit about Gingersnap Jess Cookies.
Yeah. I just wasn't in a position for a long time to be able to start a side business. To be clear, I've been baking ever since, I was a toddler, and my mom would put me on the stool next to her and put an apron that was too big on me. I've loved baking, especially holiday baking. It's really big in my family, and I just always loved the chemistry of it and the experimentation of it. So it's been probably my oldest and most consistent hobby throughout my life. I've done a lot of stress baking, and more stressful jobs. I find it to be really meditative and creative. And so it's something that's always stuck with me. Even in Peace Corps, I found ways to get some ingredients or have them mailed to me and make brownies, in my toaster oven in rural mountainous El Salvador. So I've always found a way to do it. And I knew for a long time that I wanted to open a business. So it just finally was the right time where I was in a stable job where I wasn't traveling as much for work. And I was like, okay, I think now is the time. I'd been working on my kind of original 2 recipes for a couple years, which were a brown butter chocolate chip recipe, a really thick, soft chocolate chip cookie. It's kind of crispy around the edges. And then another recipe, which is an adaptation of a pretty obscure 1990s Martha Stewart holiday cookie recipe. And it's for a ginger chocolate cookie, which is not a flavor combination that you see in a lot of places. So I've been tinkering with it, and then finally got it to a point where I thought it worked really well as a large cookie. And I started. I just had to start.
Well, great segue when you said large cookie.
Yeah.
Because
great segue into lunch, or
yes. Any and all, yes. You have coined the greatest word combo ever. The 1/4 pound cookie. well, number one, where's this been all my life? And what gave you that idea?
I just really don't like a very small cookie in most cases. There are a couple occasions in which I think they're appropriate, but when I like give someone a treat or I get a treat, I want it to feel like substantial. I want it to feel like it's not going to be gone in 2 bites, especially if it's a flavor I really love. I want time to actually take a few bites of it, maybe even share it. And so that was the idea behind my cookies, was I wanted to make them large enough to actually last and to share and to really feel like you were getting a full dessert experience and not just kind of like a little bite.
Yeah. No, definitely.
You had me.
Brown butter chocolate chip sounds amazing.
And full disclosure, folks, we have some on the way here at Serving as a Serve because Katelyn's the brains of the outfit. If you haven't figured that from this podcast, I don't know what that makes me. I'm just so along for the ride.
I was going to say, like he's got a modeling past. He can be the face of the operation.
So she said, "Hey Dan, what about a great idea? Let's order for all of our team for a nice little holiday treat." So I'm literally, running. I'm like a puppy running to the door looking for the mailman for that to get here. So can't wait to taste these. Sorry, Katelyn, I jumped in there.
Oh no, I'm very excited for cookies as well. Dan's very generous. I did think it would be nice to do for the team. And I thought that it would also go over better than, hey, Dan, order me some cookies. So anyway.
You know me all so well.
I think it's interesting, just the kind of connections between science and baking, because I'm somebody who's in the kitchen all the time. I love food. I love to cook. Baking is a challenge for me, though, because cooking is sort of like improv. It's you kind of throw a bunch of things together and something happens, right? Baking is very much a science, and it's about getting it right, and you make the recipe over and over again and you refine it over time. And it just requires a level of patience and precise precision that I just don't have. So I think it's interesting, your background with health and science communication with baking and the similarities there. Are there other kind of skills or lessons from your time as a federal employee that have been helpful for you as you've pivoted to running the cookie business full time?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, I was a digital media specialist, and my time as a contractor before that, I did a lot of video production, photo production, social media management for a lot of different government accounts. So I had learned so much from working with, great graphic designer teams, great video production teams, and shout out a local production team, 522 Productions in Alexandria. I'd worked with them a bunch of times, and they taught me so much while I was a contractor. So I feel like I took it was like, for the first time, I had taken all of the skills, all of the project management, all of the digital media, all of those skills that I'd used in service of agencies or other clients, and I had to be my own client, which is a super awkward experience, to be totally honest. I don't mind public speaking. I love, getting to know people. I'm very extroverted, but talking to a camera is something I'm not actually very comfortable with. So that's been, I think, the learning curve, but I've just tried to take all of my skills basically from the last 15 years of my career and apply them to growing my own business. And as far as like the science of baking is concerned, there's an adage that is, recipes will sort of box you in, but ratios will set you free. And the truth is that baking is about ratios. It's about math. It's about learning what you end up with when you have certain ratios of different ingredients, and then what you can play with within that structure and what is fixed. And so that really appealed to me, just as a creative and as somebody who really loves and appreciates science as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't heard that about ratios. It does kind of sound freeing. Maybe I'll learn those ratios, and then I can make my pumpkin bread not liquid in the center. That'd be good.
Now, Jess, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, being in the business you're in now, you probably know the names Wally Amos and Debbie Fields. as far as Famous Amos and Mrs. Fields Cookies. So what's the big dream? What's the big dream for Gingersnap Jess?
That's funny that you mentioned Mrs. Fields, especially because one of my first like big girl cookbooks when I was a kid was the Mrs. Fields cookbook. And the maple vanilla shortbread recipe that I make today is an adaptation and a riff off of one of her shortbread recipes, which it's like, there are only so many ways to make shortbread, right? But I love that recipe and kind of adapted over the years, added different flavor techniques, and that it became my own. Yeah, so I get asked this question a lot. I think it is what I want for this business and what I want for myself has evolved so much in the last 4 months because I really did. I loved it as a side hustle and I wanted it to remain that, to be this like kind of fun thing that wasn't too stressful, that I could maybe dedicate myself to once I had retired from the NIH. So in this time, I feel like I have learned to dream a little bit differently about what I want this to be, especially having grown my social media presence. I really started to like doing more educational posts about it. So I think kind of I'm going to keep the business going, but I also do want to kind of grow my own kind of personality and my own style of baking on social media and share that with people as well. I don't think when I started, I really felt like I had a lot to tell people that hadn't been said before. But, there's so much to know about baking and there's so many different ways you can get that information.
Sure.
So that's, I definitely see myself doing that. I don't see myself having a storefront, which I think surprises people when I say that. Running a bakery is an incredibly stressful business, and bravo to anyone who is able to do it. I don't think that's the path for me. I would love to be able to continue doing corporate orders, wholesale orders, hopefully in like different local coffee shops or businesses, things like that. That would be my ideal situation, would be to grow like a wholesale and corporate order business, I think.
Nice.
Very cool. I think it's interesting, the education piece. I mean, and I'll definitely keep an eye out because I need a lot of baking education, but I think that would be great because I think, as somebody who really hasn't done, I mean, like I said, I cook a lot, but that was just sort of out of, necessity that I fell into that. But baking is something that does kind of intimidate folks, I think. And I think it's a shame because it probably, I mean, it's hard to me because I still don't understand it, but I think it maybe isn't like what you were talking about with ratios. Maybe it's not as scary as maybe it otherwise would be. And it does kind of make sense, the education piece. I know you said that was a bit of a surprise for you, but being, a health and human sciences digital media specialist, communicating, like taking really complex ideas and communicating them in a way that like the average person can understand them. I mean, that always, has that education component. It's kind of similar to what we do, right? We take really complex financial concepts and federal benefits, which are very convoluted, and we translate it in a way that hopefully is easy to understand, from the average person's perspective. And that's a huge education component. I always say if I didn't do what I do, I would be a teacher because I spend all of my time teaching anyway. So yeah, that's really cool. Well, you had recently shared, and if you don't want to get into details on this on the podcast, I totally understand. But recently there was some good news on the front of kind of next directions and moving forward on the career front. Would you like to share any of that?
Yeah, I can share kind of a rough detail. Yeah. So I did receive a job offer and I'm working towards kind of getting that locked down. It does require a clearance. So that process, as you probably know, is long and can be sort of like a black box part of the job acquisition process. So in the meantime, I'm still very much focused on the business. But I think moving forward, if that opportunity does, fully pan out and I start in that position, then I think I will need to be kind of more exact and intentional about how this business fits into my life moving forward. Just be like very disciplined about it, basically.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, because you can't go getting me hooked on this stuff and then take it away.
I will not stop.
I'm leaning into this, Jess. I know I'm going to like this stuff. I mean, I literally am tasting the words as I read the titles to my family. So,
absolutely. Well, so as you know, Jess, being part of the federal community, there's a lot of feds right now who are feeling very anxious about rifts, about downsizing, about pivots that they may have had to make in the past year. So what advice would you give to somebody who is facing that kind of uncertainty right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I think federal employees are some of the most resilient and resourceful people. I think, unfortunately, there's some really kind of wrong beliefs about us kind of out there in the atmosphere that we don't understand, how to do real work or things like that. And kind of rather than address that, I'll just say, in my experience, I have found that federal employees, first of all, a lot of us have served in different ways before we've become civil service employees, either through Peace Corps, either through, through the military. And anyone who's been in those kind of situations will tell you, you are dealing with ambiguity all of the time. You're dealing with insecurity all of the time. You're dealing with lack of resources, and you bring back thinking into your federal job. And, the NIH, before I lost my job, the NIH had been on a flat budget for about 5 years, which is essentially a budget decrease, right? Like with inflation. So during my time there, I was writing strategy. I was figuring out ways to save us money. I was figuring out kind of ways around lack of resources to still further our mission. And I certainly was not the only one. I think the majority of people that I've talked to are very, very much like that as well. And I would just, encourage federal employees, this is a really, really hard moment, but you've been able to meet hard moments before, and you've been able to pivot. And I'm sure you have so many skills that will translate into whatever you'd like to do next, or whatever you have to do. Maybe it's not your dream job or your dream business that you get to do, but you can figure out a way to make it work and kind of create a bridge for yourself during this time. I'm seeing it all the time when I talk to other fired feds, and I've had the chance to be involved with the organization We Are Well Fed, which was started by 2 or 4 probationary employees who were fired from FDA back in February. And the pace and the skill with which they've been able to grow these organizations is truly incredible. And I think really just speaks to the capability of the civil service.
Absolutely. I've been saying that for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jess, we wish you all the best. We cannot wait to get our cookies, and we wish you all the best with the business. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't let our listeners know where they can get their own delicious holiday baked goods this year. So where can they find you?
Yeah. So my website is gingersnapjesscookies.com. Very simple. I ship anywhere within the state of Maryland at the moment. But if you live in DC, you live in Virginia, I can do local delivery, or you can pick up from me in Laurel, Maryland. So I have a form submission on my website with any questions. People can submit questions or order requests there, or they can order directly from me if they're in Maryland, and they can either pick up or I can ship to you.
Perfect. And that website for you guys, folks, I know you have your pencils ready. It is www.gingersnapjesscookies, cookies plural, because you're not going to order just one, .com. www.gingersnapjesscookies.com. We will have her linked in the description of this episode as well.
Absolutely. Now, I do have a closing question that has really piqued my curiosity. So, I went through your social feed and things like that, and I found your free will TikTok. Okay. And how the heck did you end up pulling Edison Lighthouse for the music for that? Love grows where my rosemary goes. You are no way old enough to know that song. I was only 4 when that song came out.
I'm going to say it was trending on TikTok. And,
okay.
And what the algorithm wants, the algorithm gets. And it seemed to really fit that video in particular. I always go through multiple tracks, and I was like, this one really fits. I like it. So I'm going to do it.
As soon as I click it, it's like, whoa, I know that song. That is amazing. Jess, I'm so glad that we've gotten to know you. I'm so glad that our listeners are going to get to know you here. You really embody, the great attributes that I've known have been in the folks of the federal service for so long. And good luck on this next job. I hope it works out for you. And, but not so much that you give up the baking, because again, I have a feeling I'm going to get hooked on these quarter-pound cookies. And I've already, booked additional treadmill time so that, so that I can address them. But, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, and happy holidays to everyone.
All right, folks. That's all the time that we have for today, and a little bit more, but hopefully it was time sweetly spent.
Totally worth it.
We'll be back next week to bring you all the latest updates you need to make informed decisions about your career and financial well-being as a Fed. And sometimes we'll have these feel-good episodes that just kind of get to know the federal community at like a deeper level.
Indeed. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast on our YouTube channel and Spotify so you never miss an episode. And please, please, please remember to share it with your neighbors and colleagues.
Absolutely. Now, for more information on your federal benefits, financial planning for feds, we have a website. It's STWServe.com. You can bookmark it right next to Gingersnap Jess Cookies.com. And this week on our blog, we didn't have time to get to it in today's episode because we really wanted to spotlight Jess and her business, but we have an episode on Student Loan Forgiveness 2.0 for federal workers. Definitely hit that link. We also have an article on claiming unemployment during the shutdown for feds. I am hoping that by the time this episode goes live, we won't have a shutdown anymore, but who knows? So that episode or that article is there for you on the website just to educate you on what your options are there. Always trying to support you guys in challenging times like the current shutdown. While you're on our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Serving. And what that will mean is that you get all of these awesome articles delivered straight to your inbox every single week so that you never miss the information that you need as a Fed.
And don't forget our live webinars every single week. A couple are coming up that you don't want to miss. Our FEHB Expanded to go along with Open Season. That's on November 19th. I'll go from 10:30 to 2:30. And also our Social Security webinar on November 13th, which will be from 1 till 4. Sign up for one, sign up for all. You are going to get a whole lot smarter about your benefits by doing that.
And of course, if you prefer a one-on-one approach, if, like Jess's situation, things are changing quickly for you, if you have had to make a big pivot and you need support, we are always here for that as well. You can reach out to our team directly for a financial planning consultation at meetings@stwserve.com, and we'd be happy to talk about serving you as a little bit more engaged one-on-one partner. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Fed15. I am Katelyn Murray.
And I am an impatiently waiting for cookies Dan Sipe.
And we will see you next week. Take care, everybody.